You can be in the middle of a crowd, smiling, talking, even laughing, and still feel like you don't exist. That's not loneliness. That's something deeper. That's what I call the social ghost effect. We like to think that being surrounded by people protects us from isolation. But here's the uncomfortable truth. You can drown in attention and still starve for connection. Why does that happen? Why do some people become invisible even when the room is full of noise and light? I'll show you what no one tells you, the real psychology behind that emptiness, and how it slowly turns people into ghosts long before they're gone. And I promise, only at the end of this video, when you've seen the whole picture, you'll finally understand why you feel unseen and what it actually means to exist again. Most people think loneliness comes from being alone, but the real cause is the opposite. It's when you're surrounded by others who look at you, yet never see you. It's a slow disappearance. First, they stop listening. Then, you stop speaking. And eventually, you stop showing up, even when you're still there. I'm going to break down the psychology behind this invisible pain, the patterns, the hidden conditioning, and the silent wounds that make people fade in plain sight. But before we go deeper, keep one thing in mind. This isn't about weakness, it's about how the human mind protects itself from being ignored. Most people think invisibility happens overnight. It doesn't. It's a pattern that starts quietly, long before you notice it. It begins when you learn that being too much makes people uncomfortable. So you start shrinking. You speak a little softer. You share a little less. You stop expecting to be understood. Until one day, your silence feels more natural than your voice. That's the first stage of becoming a social ghost. Psychologists call it learned invisibility, a defense mechanism built from rejection and emotional neglect. When your presence is met with indifference, your brain adapts by hiding what makes you visible. It's protection disguised as personality. And here's the cruel part, society rewards it. The quieter you are, the easier you are to tolerate. You become easy to be around, low drama, so independent. But behind those compliments hides a dangerous truth. You've stopped being real to stay accepted. This is where the social ghost effect gains strength. You're physically there, but emotionally elsewhere. People see your body, but not your soul. They hear your words, but not your meaning. And the longer it happens, the more invisible you become, even to yourself. You start wondering, maybe I really don't matter that much. That's not humility. That's psychological erosion. The worst part? You might not even realize it's happening, because invisibility doesn't hurt like a wound. It fades like a color. And by the time you notice, you're already transparent. But almost nobody notices the next stage, and that's where the real damage begins. And this is where things start to break. Because once you become invisible to others, you start disappearing from yourself. At first, it feels like peace. No pressure, no conflict, no expectations. You tell yourself, I'm fine like this. But deep down, there's a voice whispering that you're not living, you're only existing. Only a few people ever recognize this stage, because on the outside, you look okay. You go to work. You reply to messages. You smile at the right moments. But inside, there's nothing but static, a low, constant hum of disconnection. That's the emotional collapse no one sees. It's not a breakdown full of tears, it's the silent kind. The one where you stop feeling worthy of being heard. You start avoiding mirrors because you don't recognize who's there anymore. And when people ask how you're doing, you lie automatically, I'm good. If that sounds familiar, it's not because you're broken. It's because your mind learned to survive in a world that stopped noticing you. It numbed itself to avoid more pain. That's not weakness, it's adaptation. But like every defense, it comes at a cost. And here's the part almost nobody talks about. The more you try to fit in by hiding, the lonelier you get. You think being quiet will protect you, but silence doesn't save you, it buries you. Because when nobody truly sees you for too long, you start believing you don't deserve to be seen. And that belief changes everything. But there's one layer even deeper, and most people never escape it. But there's one part of the social ghost effect that almost nobody talks about. The point where invisibility stops being something that happened to you and becomes something you start doing to yourself. You begin to pull away before anyone can ignore you. You stop opening up because you assume they won't care. You don't show what you feel because you're sure they wouldn't understand. Without realizing, you start feeding the same cycle that once hurt you. And this is the painful truth. You don't just become invisible, you start choosing invisibility. Not because you want to disappear, but because being unseen feels safer than being rejected again. This is where the mind betrays the heart. It thinks it's protecting you, but in reality, it's locking you in isolation. You stop being the victim of invisibility and become its architect. A ghost who built their own walls, brick by brick, in silence. But here's the turning point: ghosts can return. You don't need anyone's permission to exist again. Visibility doesn't start when others notice you. It starts when you decide to stop hiding. That means speaking even when your voice shakes, showing emotion even when it feels embarrassing, setting boundaries even when it feels selfish. Every time you do that, you reclaim one more piece of yourself that disappeared. And slowly, people start to see you again, not because they changed, but because you stopped dimming your own light to make them comfortable. You can't control who sees you, but you can control whether you keep showing up as someone worth seeing. Being visible isn't about noise, popularity, or validation. It's about presence. It's about saying I'm here even when no one claps. It's about existing out loud after years of silence. Most people will never admit this, but the real cure for loneliness isn't being surrounded. It's being authentic, because authenticity is magnetic. When you stop hiding your real thoughts, your real emotions, your real flaws, you attract the kind of people who can finally see you. And if you've been living like a ghost, half present, half alive, remember, invisibility isn't permanent. It's a habit, and habits can be broken. It starts small, by replying honestly when someone asks how you're doing, by not apologizing for taking up space, by understanding that the right people won't need you to be smaller to feel comfortable. Maybe this is the part you were waiting for. The part where I tell you that nothing's wrong with you for feeling invisible. Because there isn't. You were never meant to be unseen. You were just surrounded by people who didn't know how to look. So if this message reached you, if it made you pause for even a second, then maybe, for the first time in a long time, someone did see you. And if this kind of truth helps you see yourself too, subscribe, stay close, because this channel isn't about noise. It's about depth. And in a world full of echoes, depth is what makes you real. You don't need to shine brighter. You just need to stop dimming your light.